It was the middle of the night. Airbus A330 belonging to Air Transat was on its way from Toronto to Lisbon over the Atlantic. Suddenly, the engines flamed out. The aircraft now had to land on water or divert to the nearest airport if there was any. This is the story of Air Transat Flight 236 and how a mistake made during maintenance nearly costed the lives of 306 people. 23rd August 2001 was another day during the summer holidays. Many people were traveling with their children and families. At around 8 in the evening, 293 passengers, mostly holidaymakers and Portuguese nationals returning home, as well as 13 crew members boarded the Airbus A330-200 bound for Lisbon in Portugal. The aircraft was new and had been delivered to Air Transat only 2 years before that day. At 8:52 p.m., the flight left Toronto Pearson Airport for a 7-hour journey. The flight was flown by Captain Robert Piché, who had 6,800 hours of flight experience, and First Officer Dirk DeJager, who had 4,800 flight hours. Leaving the gate in Toronto, the aircraft had 46.9 tons or 103,000 pounds of fuel on board, 4.5 tons or almost 10,000 pounds more than required by regulations. The beginning of the flight was uneventful. Passengers had received their meals, and after that, most of them fell asleep. At 4:30 Universal Time, so almost 4 hours into the flight, the problem started. The fuel began to leak through a fracture that had developed in a fuel line engine leading to the right engine. The abnormal parameters of that engine were noticed by the pilots around half an hour later. The pilots also didn't notice that fuel was decreasing at an unusual rate. Another 30 minutes later, fuel imbalance warning appeared in the cockpit. Rather than referring to the appropriate checklists, the pilots actioned procedures from memory. This resulted in the cross-feeding of fuel into an already leaking engine, which dramatically worsened the situation. The fractured fuel line was already leaking at about 13 tons per hour, and as a result, the transferred fuel was quickly lost. This also led to a drop in oil temperature and a rise in oil pressure for the right engine. At this point, the pilots noticed that the aircraft wouldn't reach Lisbon and decided to land. However, they were at the time in the middle of the ocean. Fortunately, there is an archipelago called the Azores, which lies on the Atlantic Ocean, and that is the place where Captain Piché decided to divert. Lajes Air Base at Terceira Island was the only suitable airport with a runway long enough for a wide-body Airbus A330. A fuel emergency was also declared. At 6:13 Universal Time, while the aircraft was still 150 nautical miles from Lajes and at 39,000 feet, the right engine flamed out due to the lack of fuel. Piché immediately initiated a descent to 33,000 feet, which was the proper single-engine altitude for the weight of the plane at that time. 10 minutes later, the crew sent a mayday to the air traffic control. After around 3 minutes, the second engine also flamed out. At this moment, the aircraft was still 65 nautical miles or 120 kilometers from the Lajes airport. The giant Airbus lost all electrical power, which was however partially restored as a result of the deployment of a special ram air turbine. Air Transat Flight 236 was a big glider at the moment. The ram turbine only powered basic flight instruments and control systems, so flaps, spoilers, alternate brakes, and pressurization systems weren't working. As a result, the oxygen masks dropped down in the passenger cabin. Shortly after, another problem appeared. The aircraft was too fast and too high to land at Lajes Air Base. Reducing speed using spoilers was not an option as well. Fortunately, Piché executed one 360-degree turn and then a series of S-turns to dissipate excess altitude. At 6:45 local time, the plane touched down hard, around 310 meters or 1,030 feet past the threshold of runway 33 at a speed of around 200 knots. The Airbus instantly bounced and then touched the ground down again, roughly 850 meters or 2,800 feet from the runway's threshold. Maximum emergency braking was applied. After the plane came to a stop, 1 kilometer or around 3,000 feet of the runway was still remaining. All tires deflated and burned as a result of braking. After the aircraft had stopped, the evacuation started. 14 passengers and 2 crew members received minor injuries, while 2 passengers had serious injuries. The plane suffered structural damage to the main landing gear and the lower fuselage due to the hard touchdown and debris from the landing gear. Shortly after the investigation started, it revealed that the primary cause of the accident were the crew's actions in mishandling a fuel leak in the right engine. The fuel leak resulted from fitment of an incorrect part to the hydraulics system by Air Transat maintenance staff as part of routine maintenance. The engine had been replaced with a spare engine lent by Rolls-Royce from an older model which did not include a hydraulic pump. Despite the lead mechanic's concerns, Air Transat authorized the use of a part from a similar engine, an adaptation that did not maintain adequate clearance between the hydraulic lines and the fuel line. This allowed chafing between the lines to rupture the fuel line, causing the leak. However, in theory, problems could have been avoided if the flight crew properly detected a fuel problem and responded to the fuel imbalance advisory, which was noted on the fuel ECAM page. The report accused the crew of not correctly evaluating the situation before taking action, and not recognizing that a fuel leak situation existed, carrying out the fuel imbalance procedure from memory, which resulted in the fuel from the left tanks being fed to the leak in the right engine. The pilots also ignored many other indications that a significant fuel loss was occurring. If they reacted correctly, the Airbus A330 would have safely reached Lajes Air Base in the Azores without the need for gliding. Nevertheless, the pilots returned to a hero's welcome from the Canadian press as a result of their successful unpowered landing. In 2002, Captain Piché was awarded the Superior Airmanship Award by the Airline Pilots Association and continued to fly for Air Transat. He retired in 2017 when he flew his last flight with an A330. As a result of the accident, Air Transat received a 25,000 Canadian dollars fine, which was at the time highest in Canadian history. The aircraft was repaired and returned to service with Air Transat in December 2001 with the nickname Azores Glider. It was placed into storage in 2020 because of the pandemic, and in 2021, the aircraft made its last flight with Air Transat and was subsequently returned to the lessor. As you see, even small mistakes by the maintenance crew can lead to serious problems. In this case, installing an old engine resulted in a rupture of the fuel line, which led to the leak. The leak itself was also mishandled by the pilots, who were reacting based on their memory and not proper checklists. Fortunately, nobody was seriously hurt in this accident. Air Transat 236 was the longest ever gliding of the passenger jet, surpassing Air Canada 143, known as the Gimli glider. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to my channel.